more questions than answers. And that's actually what I want you guys to do. So I think most dietitians do not think before they hire, right? We see a shitstorm in a litany of issues in our space. And that is the reason why I'm doing this presentation, right? If I can just help one of you guys intentionally think through the process, I think I have done my due diligence. So you're going to leave probably 100% of you guys are probably going to leave the webinar with more questions than answers. And if I have not done that for you, then I have not done my job with this presentation. So we are going to talk through what I call the B.O.S.S method for hiring. I know, shocking, that I would have something like that. And then what we are going to do is at every part of the journey, we're going to go through that and we're going to determine what are your next steps. So, like where you are falling in terms of this framework, we are then going to come up with a roadmap for what you would
in the sense that
do next. Okay.
I'm trying to see.
Hey, Natalie, you're on. Everybody,
Sorry.
you guys want to mute yourself. Just so, okay, great. Awesome. Cool. Awesome. So if you are fully booked, if you are exhausted and you are asking what is next for me, there's a good chance that you are on the right presentation. Some of you guys may be wondering if you should hire a dietitian, if you should hire an assistant, if you should start seeking additional sources of revenue, or I want to just kind of pose this for you as well, because generally people don't think about this. It's also totally cool to stay a solo practice and do all of the things to optimize your practice, right? We're going to talk through a lot of mindset stuff. And one of the biggest misconceptions is you need to grow and scale into a group practice. I'm going to walk you guys through a lot of the mistakes that I obviously made, and talk about why I do not think adding more people to your team is always a good thing. And I can say this sincerely as somebody who has probably hired hundreds of dietitians at this point. Managing yourself is generally quite easy. Managing dietitians, that's like a whole separate beast, right? And there's just no words, and we'll talk about that. So I think it seems good in theory, and for many of you guys, it may seem like the natural next step, but for many of you, I do not think you are generally prepared for what that hiring process looks like. So I say this from a place of love. Human resources is always going to be the hardest thing in your business. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are the director of clinical at Yale New Haven Hospital. This part is hard. So I want to ask you guys the question, right? Do you really, really, really want to be the boss? Because if you spent any time with me, you know, being the boss is my least favorite part of my job. You guys may think that I relish in this, but if I could make $1 million+ a year doing what I was doing, I'd gladly go get a red shirt and work at Target. I probably go, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I do not think anybody necessarily wants to be the boss. You guys want more money, you want to make a bigger impact. And some of you guys are on the fence in terms of like feeling like you have to hire. But whether or not you want to be the boss, I think probably is left up to discussion, because I do not think that most dietitians realize and CNSs realize the responsibility that comes with hiring. And so I always have to throw out this picture in most of my presentations if you've attended, because I think you guys see it's like anything for you guys who know me, who are not my coaching clients and who have not spent time with me, like you see the somewhat finalized version of Amy P. But what most of you guys did not see or did not know, because it was before social media, is that I was just where you were probably many years ago. And obviously here I have less wrinkles. I have a bigger smile. But little did I know, did this girl in this picture, what she was in store for. Okay. Her system sucked in her practice. She did not understand profit margins. She did not have a documented workflow. It was all in my head. And I was doing everything myself. I was not delegating because a lot of you guys probably feel the same way on the call. The reason why I was not delegating, even sending patients to other dietitians was I thought nobody could do it as good as I could, right? No way humanly possible could anybody do my job. And so this is baby Amy, before she launched, $1 million+ brand. And so I think we always have to go back to our roots. And like I said, I understand and appreciate like, where people see where I am today. But I just started exactly where you guys are today. So it wouldn't be a typical Amy P presentation to not talk about the hard truths of hiring. And I just want to be really clear. It was funny. As I was putting to get this slide deck, I was like, this is like it's like birth control for hiring, right? It's like, and so I'm not trying to scare you away from hiring. I do not want that to come across. I just want you to intentionally hire and do it from a place of confidence and clarity, not from desperation. So what baby Amy found was when I started hiring, when I did not have all of the things in place, every single problem I had became even more magnified, right? And so the truths are, if you guys do not have the right systems, which we're going to talk about, if you do not have the right mindset, we're going to drill the shit out of this today, and you do not have the right strategy, your intentions of hiring will turn into a flaming dumpster fire of shit right in front of your eyes. And it will burn to the ground because I know this because I hired the wrong way and I had to rebuild. And so hiring is a long-term strategy, not a short-term fix. Okay. I want to like sit on this piece a bit. Last week alone, I think I had 3 calls with dietitians in my coaching program about whether or not they were ready to hire. In the first, I have people fill out kind of like a memo. If you're going to have a meeting with me, you need to give me an agenda. And so I understand that you have done your homework surrounded hiring. And I think 100% of all of the dietitians that I had calls with, what they told me that they were looking at hiring for was they needed more money in their practice right now. Okay. And I can tell you wholeheartedly that hiring can be an amazing financial aspect of scaling your practice. But historically, we're going to talk about it. It is not a short-term financial fix for anything. Because the mindset piece for a lot of you guys is super important, right? And so I want you guys to sit with this question because I know a lot of you guys feel this way. Am I on this webinar because I feel like I have to hire? I feel like that's the next logical step in my journey. I am at capacity and I feel like this is the only way to do it. Because today we're going to talk about lots of different ways to scale your practice. And I have a dietitian in my coaching program who I have been working with since 2020. They were one of my first coaching clients ever when I used to offer one-on-ones. And this is a dietitian who makes $20,000+ per month. Right hand to God. I am not talking shit. I see his numbers on all of our calls, and he has zero interest in hiring. It's just not what he wants to do. It's just not who he is as a person. And there's lots of different ways for them to scale, right? But I do not want you guys to feel like this is the only next step for you, because a lot of times you guys are looking to fill a role, right? Like a function. But the reality is, like, if we do not slow down to speed up, we are going to be hiring from a place of fear. And when we are hiring from a place of fear, our employees will feel that, right? And we're going to talk about control, which for many of us, including myself, is a really hard thing to, is a really hard thing to manage. And so I want you guys to kind of understand this is not the only next step. It may be what you feel like, and you have been told, but coming from a veteran who's been hiring since 2009, way before she was ready and way before I was even qualified to hire, I do not think if I went back to 2009 and somebody gave me this presentation, I probably would have approached the whole hiring process extremely differently. So I do not want you to hire because you feel like you should. I want you to hire because you want more for our field, you want more impact. Yes, you want to make money, but at the end of the day, the mindset piece, you will need to hire from a place of confidence, clarity, and commitment, right? Those are the three things you are going to need. And if you do not have them right now, we're going to talk about how to build those up. But I do not want anybody on this call to feel like that is the only way to scale. Okay. And if anybody's on, just make sure you guys mute yourself, because it seems like we are not all muted. So one of my favorite quotes is, "The hard way is the easy way." I'm going to say that again. The hard way is the easy way. A lot of times, dietitians do a lot of stupid shit. I'm just going to say that straight up. And I can say that because I did a lot of stupid shit. And a lot of the things that you guys do, and one of the biggest mistakes I see you guys making is you hire dietitians as independent contractors versus employees. And so there are legal implications in many states in terms of hiring dietitians as independent contractors. In many states, and in most states, the classification of dietitians is not permissible to function as an independent contractor. And what I really want to drive home is just because somebody is doing it, right? Just because you have worked for somebody who hired you as an independent contractor, it does not mean it is legal. Okay. Whether or not you can do this is state dependent. And I think what most dietitians don't realize is there are substantial fines and back taxes in the event you misclassify an employee as an independent contractor. Okay. And we'll talk about that in a second because I think for a lot of you guys, you don't know what you don't know. And I want to talk you through that piece. So there are legal implications that many dietitians are violating. I do think they are violating them unknowingly. But what I can tell you from being audited by the IRS twice, they do not care. They do not care that you did not know. They just care that you misclassified a dietitian as an independent contractor and put them in that role. Okay, so the control issues. I know some of you guys will tell me that you are not a typical dietitian. You will tell me that you are not a typical type A, CNS or dietitian. I have never met a dietitian who was not a control freak. It is just in our DNA. It is in our academics. It's just like it runs through our pores. So I don't care if you told me, I do not believe you. And so as somebody who is 1000% OCD control freak, you hiring as an independent contractor means you have zero control over the people on your team. Okay. And I love to see this. I must see this like 10 times a week where a dietitian is telling me she has an independent contractor, but she's telling me she's selling programs and packages, right? And those programs and packages, right, they have very clearly defined ways in which you guys get outcomes in patients, right? So there is a level of control. Whether or not you tell, like, dietitians say, well, I don't tell the dietitian when she can work, right? She can make her own schedule. That is not the definition of an independent contractor, right? So you guys probably don't know this, but if you have independent contractors working for you and you are paying for their EMR, that is a violation of the IRS's definition. They are supposed to bring their own tools. Okay. I want you to I want you to think of independent contractors like a plumber. And I want you guys to be educated in the public Facebook pages. When people say really stupid shit, I want you to remind them of this analogy. Okay. I live in a condo, I'm on the 16th floor. If I have a problem with my toilet, I would call a plumber, right? And so the plumber comes into my house. I do not help tell them how to fix the toilet. I do not provide them with a toolkit to fix the toilet, right? He just comes in, he fixes the toilet whatever way he wants, and he gives me an invoice, right? If he happens to pass one of my 6 neighbors on the way down in the elevator, he can go work for them as well, right? So independent contractors work for themselves. They supply all of their own tools, including their EMR, and they do the job the way that they want to do the job. So, especially if you're a dietitian and you work in eating disorders and you are hiring a dietitian who is new to eating disorders, shame on anybody from ever thinking that that is okay, right? And don't worry, we'll get to all of your questions too at the end. So just as we're going through these, feel super comfortable and just plug them in the chat. Okay, so control issues. Dietitians have control issues to begin with. It makes it even harder if they say they're going to be an independent contractor. It also completely fucks your culture because you're hiring temporary people that are disconnected. They're probably not vested, and you cannot offer them benefits. You cannot offer them bonuses. So if there is another practice who can offer them that, there is a good chance while they will be with you short term, they may go seek other employment, right? So the goal for you guys is to build a business. Hiring independent contractors is not building a culture, that will support long-term business growth. I also think it fucks our profession. You know what I mean? It's like we see this, it's like the Fays of the world, the Berry Streets of the world, right? Like that's not good for our profession. And the reason why that's not good for our profession, because they're hiring as independent contractors, like it's not empowering to our profession, right? It's screwing our profession. So why are we saying that the Fays and the Berry Streets of the world are like the worst people on the planet when there's dietitians that are underpaying their independent contractors, right? They are not advancing our field because they are not providing appropriate compensation. So it's the same thing, it's just under a different label. So it is not one of the biggest reasons why I am such a stark advocate of speaking up against independent contractors that it does not create a business. It does not allow you to grow an empire. What I want you to think about right now is if you have a private practice, and I know we often think short term, my goal for you in your private practice is that I do not care if it's around next month. I want it to be around next decade, right? I started my practice in 2007, right? We have definitely had our fair shares of ups and downs, but we are still here and we're stronger than ever. That is what I want for every single person on this call, right? And you are not going to get there, with independent contractors. And then what I can tell you, because on 2 of the 3 calls last week, the biggest complaint among the dietitians who had independent contractors working for them was that like they were leaving, right? Well, I would fucking leave too if you didn't offer me benefits, good compensation, a stable schedule, right? Like it makes sense, right? So it's like, and to be honest with you, one of the dietitians had said to me, this group thing is not working for me. And I had to stand corrected that you do not have a group practice if you have independent contractors. Okay, you do not, right? You have a practice where you have people that are working for themselves, and taking your overflow, right? So it does not create a sound practice. And you will find, if you have not already, you are constantly replacing these people, okay? The question that I often get asked is, why do dietitians do this then? Okay, number one, I think they just don't know. right? Like they don't realize that the risks involved in it. And I think what you guys don't realize, because usually when shit hits the fan with most dietitians in private practice, almost 98% of the time, I'm usually their first phone call. And what I think people do not realize is you have one disgruntled independent contractor. Like you guys, we always talk about these big companies and all the badness that they bring. But who do you think, like, when shit happens with licensure or things happen in this kind of employment world that we're talking about today, who do you think is the whistleblower, right? It's the dietitians, right? You have one disgruntled person who, who did not like the way things went down with you, in that independent contractor role. Like that is the tip to the IRS, right? So it's like, I know we want to like blame everything on, on these big telehealth companies, but the reality is for me as somebody who is on the receiving end of helping you guys work through these pieces, this is a dietitian problem. And like I said, most dietitians in these spaces are one complaint away, from being on the IRS's list. The second piece you guys always ask me is like, why do people do this? Well, they think it's cheaper, right? So, right, they don't have to pay payroll tax, they don't have to think about benefits, labor laws, PTO, overhead, workman's comp, all of the fun things that I get to think about on a day-to-day basis. So they think it's cheaper, right? Because they can just pay them a set rate, right? And like, remember when I was just saying is that the hard usually, it's like the hard way is the easy way. Most dietitians go the easy way, which becomes the hard way. So it is not cheaper in the long run. In most dietitians, the third piece, like I said, you guys always ask me, why do people do this? They're afraid of commitment, right? They're afraid of the cost. They're afraid of like the number of clients. They can only offer part-time. So, their lack of commitment is a lack of commitment, to the people that work in their practice. So that is what I want to talk about in terms of independent contractors. Like I said, we'll circle back to your questions on this, but I just want people to understand this. And for anybody who joined us late, just because you're working for somebody as an independent contractor does not mean in any shape or form it's legal, right? Like I said, dietitians do lots of shady shit all day long, knowingly or unknowingly, but it does not make it right, right? So it's like, that's why a lot of times like there's lots of legal questions. So the hard way is the easy way. Okay. And most of you guys are trying to skirt this. I get it too, because I like skirted the shit out of it. And then I was just left, with a disaster. So I want you to think about most things in business. Like most of us know on some level, like that's why I also die in some of these public Facebook pages. Most of us know like right from wrong. But a lot of dietitians will go into these public Facebook pages and crowdsource bad information that reinforces their bad behavior, right? So like you guys see it all the time. You guys are in the same Facebook pages I am. I sit back and I scratch my head. I have a hole probably that's like down to my heart in my head from why people ask ethical questions that they know the answers to. Okay. So I thought it was super important to talk about independent contractors because some of you guys are working in this capacity. Some of you guys have independent contractors. But now I want to take you guys through the framework that I use with dietitians to identify like where is the weakest link, right? So for most dietitians, for every single business I work with, there is a weak link. There is something that is holding that dietitian from scaling. And a lot of times they are not aware of it. And why I say that is 90% of all consulting calls I do, the call, the directions at the end of the call are very different than the dietitian thought. So what the dietitian thought she needed to work on, right, is very different than what we ultimately decide to. Okay. So I love this framework. I think it's awesome. I hope you guys love it as well. But the B.O.S.S method, we're going to kind of, we're going to go through the acronym B.O.S S. So we're going to talk about bandwidth and burnout. So we're going to talk about kind of the mindset that needs to be in place. We're going to talk about operations and systems and how freaking important they are. Then we're going to talk about money, stability and strategy. Like, what does that look like when you're hiring? What do you guys need? And then we're going to talk about leadership and leadership potential. This is, I think, where I got like the last S, and we'll talk about it, is the place where I think I failed the most and the most amount of times in the hiring process, because I think my expectations were different than what the reality of what my job was in my practice. Okay, so let's talk about bandwidth and burnout. Okay, and I'm going to say this from a place of love. I'm going to say this because one of the things I wish somebody told me and shook me to the side and said, like, I just never had expectations, right? I was one of the first dietitians, the only dietitians in insurance-based practices. And so I probably would have given like my left arm, for any information. But before we jump right into this, I am going to say this, and I am not trying to scare you, but this is the reality that I faced in every level that I scaled in my practice. Is it got so much more, it got worse before it got better. Okay. And most of you guys know my story. I had like 3 to 5 jobs for the first 5 to 8 years of starting my practice. And so I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd be at the gym by 4:20. I'd train from that time into about 6 o'clock. I'd go to Yale for 7. I'd work at Yale from 7 to 3. And then I would either go teach from 6 to 8:50, or I would go a couple towns down to my private practice. I would lug my gym clothes. I would lug my meals and all my stinky Tupperware and all of the things, right? I know a lot of you guys can relate to this because you're doing this right now. Okay. So like there was really like no more time in the day, like literally, right? And so when I was looking to scale my practice, I needed to be able to take on more even when I thought I couldn't, right? So it's like I had to make more time while seeing my current patient load. And most of you guys know I used to see 40 to 45 patients per week, many follow-ups, right? Most of those were follow-ups. So like that was my baseline. I did not see that many patients because I really wanted to. I saw that many patients because I thought that was normal. Like, I thought like that's what dietitians did. And so I want to just reiterate, and I needed to make money, right? So it got like the hiring process, it got a lot worse before it got better because I needed to make space in a spot where there was no space to be made. And I know you guys feel this, right? Like, even if you're like, I don't want anybody to feel like, I don't say that 40 to 45 number to create anything aside from my own narrative. If you guys are seeing 15 patients a week and you have multiple responsibilities, to both your family, to other jobs as well, because I know a lot of you guys are side hustling. It's the same experience, right? You're in a place right now where you think shit can't get any worse, right? And so you're like, this is not what I signed up for. So when we look at the bandwidth and the burnout, right? The question I need you to ask yourself is, am I operating from a place of intention in terms of hiring, or am I hiring from a place of desperation? I can 100% tell you in 2009, I was hiring from a place of desperation. I was hiring from a place of fear. And I was hiring from a place of I was just looking to put out a fire. And the fire was I had so many patients in so many jobs, in so many responsibilities that I didn't know what to do. Okay. But the reality and what I learned later on is that you should hire from a place of stability, obviously not from a place of survival. And if you're drowning in overwhelm, what I rather you do, and we're going to talk about it, is simplify your practice and outsource first. Okay. So if you're in this, like, I call this area the swamp. If you are in the swamp right now, there may be a good chance that we are going to clean up shit in your practice before we move forward, right? We're going to simplify, we're going to automate, we're going to outsource. Because for most of you guys, you're looking to hire to save your business or your mental sanity. And that is generally a pretty big red flag that this is the step that we're going to stop at right now. Okay. If you have consistent demand and you're ready to intentionally hire and you can ethically take on more, like more, not relative to patients, but more, responsibility in terms of onboarding and training, then that may be a good choice for you. But most dietitians are here. Most CNSs are here. And so that's why I want to just drill down a little bit. And so if you are here, what are my thoughts? Okay. So if you're hoping to hire because it's going to save your business or your mental health, the first thing I want you to do is a time audit. Okay. For the next 2 weeks, I have my team do this. I do this once a quarter. You guys know if you're my coaching client, I've had you do this. In 15-minute increments, write down everything you're doing every 15 minutes. I think number one, this also will reinforce efficiency, but it will also it will also document, you know, the many hats you all wear, which I wore as well, as a solopreneur, right? And so then you're going to come back and you're going to look at that time audit and you're going to say, am I, it's like, are there, where's there room for improvement? And where are areas where I could potentially outsource, right? So you have to do, it's like if you do not do a time audit and you hire an assistant as your first hire, there is a good chance that you do not even have a sense of what needs to get done and how it needs to get done. So for most dietitians, they think that they need a dietitian as their first hire, but for most dietitians, they actually need an assistant. Um, I have a whole masterclass on this. I'll talk about it at the end of the presentation, but it walks you step by step through the process of hiring an assistant. And the comment that I get from a lot of you guys, and it's the same thing that I said, is like, I used to say, I don't mind doing all of the administrative tasks. Like, I actually like it, right? I think as dietitians, we're kind of like sick. Like, we like to do like tedious, monotonous shit. Or at least I do. So it's like, I don't mind billing insurance. I think most of you guys know, like, I run my practice, I oversee my practice, I submit insurance claims, I call patients when we have disgruntled patients. So I am like, I am in the business and mostly working on the business, but I don't mind any of that stuff. But what I want you guys to find in that time audit is anything you don't want to do and anything you procrastinate doing. So I know a lot of you mofos on this call, like you guys get an insurance denial and like you put it in the pile of like, I will deal with this when I can deal with this and when I have enough bandwidth to get, to sit on the phone for hours on end. So that's the stuff that I'm talking about, procrastinate doing. Um, I think most of you guys know this. I have the most fabulous administrative team right now. And that's new for me because like I historically have not had an amazing administrative team. And what I can tell you is that a good assistant can change the game, right? It will literally change the game for your practice. And obviously, these are just some tasks you can have them do. Emails, verification of benefits, making sure the paperwork is complete, right? Snagging referrals, calling on denials, invoicing and calling patients who need money who owe you money, bookkeeping. So like reconciling your accounts. And I have social media marketing like in italics. Most of you guys, like, you don't need anybody to do social media for you right now. Like we're not doing that. Like your practice is like not as tight as it can be. So it's like, I always say it's like bringing in more people into a broken home, right? So it's like most dietitians and people that would come to a call like this, they have a capacity issue. And so they do not need right now at this time and space more people in their channels. Once again, yes, we do want to refine that and source that when it comes time to hire a dietitian because we want a consistent pipeline. um but right now that's generally not where your focus should be, right? It should really be streamlining, your practice, optimizing your systems. Okay. For good or for bad, because in from 2007 to, gosh, 2014, when I left Yale, which was like my main full-time job, I had no choice but to get efficient. And so if you're one of my coaching clients, like the systems we use in my practice, like they are as efficient as you possibly can be. Like there is no, it's like there's very little like dropping of the ball because we have systems in place that account for everything. Okay. But the only reason why I have those systems in place and they are efficient is I had no choice because I was working like 80 hours a week, just like everybody else. Like I'm not a snowflake. And my systems are not snowflakes by any means. They were just born out of necessity. Okay, so first things first, if you are feeling like you are in this swamp, you want to do a time audit, and then you probably want to think about sourcing an assistant. Okay, so like I said, I have a whole masterclass that I will talk about at the end that will show you guys how to do that. And once again, we will come back to all of the questions, I promise. So the operations and systems. So we were just chatting about that, right? The efficiency of running your practice, right? Can I plug someone into my workflow or am I still winging it? One of the, a decent amount of the consulting that I do is for dietitians who are looking to sell their private practices. And many of these dietitians have still not optimized for systems and operations. Nobody is going to buy your practice if you are in your business, unless your practice runs without you, which it does not have to. But that's a good sign is if your systems are as efficient as possible. That is the next thing you want to work on, right? And so can I literally walk out of my practice and it run without it? I can, but I've also been doing this for almost 20 years. So you guys need in place clear systems for billing. And I don't even mean just billing, submitting claims. Like you need basically like a playbook for what it looks like submitting insurance claims, right? Because long term, you guys don't want to be the ones submitting the claims, right? And most of you guys do not have a problem with submitting the claims. You have a problem with follow up and claim correction, right? And so in my practice and in my coaching program, like I have very specific boundaries and very specific rules per se surrounding billing. Like do this, then that, in terms of priority. So that way nothing falls through the cracks. Scheduling, right? Some of you guys are afraid to do online scheduling. Some of you guys are afraid to take a credit card. Some of you guys are afraid to charge your patients for no call, no shows, right? So those are all aspects of scheduling. Like it should be seamless, right? The patient experience should also be equally as amazing. Everybody's least favorite topic, documentation, right? Do you know what needs to be in documentation, right? I have a documentation masterclass, and I use that masterclass that I use for my diet for the dietitians in my coaching program. We use that in the training of hiring new dietitians. So I have a course in Kajabi, just like I have courses for everything else. That, there's a whole section for the dietitians on my team on documentation with sample notes, with what it looks like. And then once a week, I go through everybody's notes and I pull 2 to 3 notes per dietitian and I audit them. Okay. And I have an audit check sheet that we go through. And that becomes a KPI, that becomes a performance indicator down the road, all of the things. So, right, like, so a lot of you guys are like, you don't know how to document. So if you don't know how to document and you bring somebody into your ecosystem, that becomes somewhat challenging. Also, if you have independent contractors working for you, you cannot tell them how to document. So if you get audited by the insurance companies and your dietitian gives you a piece of shit, which has happened to me before, that is what you are handing into the insurance company. Like you could, like, it's once again, go back to the plumber, right? I am not telling the plumber how to fix my toilet. He's doing it without any type of, any type of feedback, right? And then obviously communication. Like you need some form of communication, whether it be WhatsApp app, whether it be Slack, so on and so forth. Like communication is such a big aspect of my practice, right? And so even from when I'm hiring, which I'm hiring right now, the responses from the applicants for the, who are jockeying for interviews, like if they are poor communicators, like at level 0, which is basically even just before I even interview them, like we're just scratching them. You know what I mean? Like they, it's like they get put on the 86 list. And if you've ever worked in a restaurant, it just means the 86 list is like what the restaurant is out of, for the evening. And so if you do not have systems in place, your hire will become a liability and not an asset. So an asset, right? For you, so those of you guys know, an asset is someone or something that puts money in your pocket. A liability, um, a liability is when they take money out of your pocket. And for most dietitians in the beginning of their career, when they're hiring, the new dietitians on their team are a liability. So the green light where you guys would move on to the next step, which is the next S, which is stability and strategy, would be you already have SOPs, EMRs, onboarding material, like you are good to go, right? So if you do not, and everything lives in your brain, and you're already behind on administration, what you want to do is do a brain dump, okay? And the brain dump will take you through the onboarding process. Okay, so it will take you start to finish. And so you want to look at your marketing pipeline. That's like where you guys are sourcing referrals. You guys want to look at the obtaining the referral process. So, like, are you in a state like California, Tennessee, Alabama, where referrals are required for every single patient you see? Once again, what does your scheduling process look like, right? Do you have a widget where patients can schedule on their own, right? Are you doing discovery calls, which I hope you're not if you're insurance based, unless you're super niche and super specific, also fine. Then you might do discovery calls. But what does the process look like? When I'm working with businesses, the word I often use is we want to decrease friction, right? We want to decrease we want to decrease friction and optimize the patient experience. Do you have automated reminders in place, right? These are all simple things that some of you guys don't have that will make your life easier, right? So we use Calyx right now. I've used all the EMRs in full transparency, but we send out text reminders. We send out email reminders, right? So it's like we are constantly doing anything we possibly can to get the patient to show up. Do you guys have a format for assessing documentation, right? Do you know what documentation has to look like, right? That's important, right? Because if you do not know what it has to look like, then it is very challenging to bring somebody else on and, assess what they're doing. Do you know how to bill like a ninja? Like this piece, like you guys know, like a lot of my coaching clients are on this call. A lot of times when I go through the application process with dietitians, one of the first things they tell me, and I get this, that they do not want to really see a ton of patients in their business. They want to hire other people to do that. I get that long term. But but what I say to those dietitians, and almost like clockwork, every single dietitian who doesn't listen to me, if that dietitian has not mastered billing like a ninja for herself, right, or himself, that is extremely problematic, right? Because if you do not, like your bloodline in an insurance-based practice is getting paid. And if you are not getting paid consistently, if you have more denials, then I get it. Don't, and I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think this is where most dietitians jump the gun in terms of hiring. Like they have not even created consistent insurance-based revenue. Or like some dietitians will say to me, like I've only ever billed for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Well, like shit, like we all know we can bill for most Blue Cross Blue Shield products like with our eyes closed. And so like if that is all you know how to do, and you have UHC, Aetna, UMR, Medicare, not to say that you're fucked, but like what are you thinking hiring somebody else into this space? Like we are just not there yet. And that is fine. Period. End of story, right? And so unless you know how to bill and you feel comfortable billing and you are getting paid, um, we need to make sure we get that first, right? And so I say that and I think I get so crazy about that because I feel when dietitians violate number 7, they give zero fucks about the people that work for them. Because, right? Like, because it's like those dietitians that come onto your team deserve to get paid and compensated on time. Like the joke in my practice is like our office could be burning down to the ground, but like everybody's getting paid on time. Like, you know what I mean? Like payroll is always getting run. And I think in almost my 20 years of having a group practice, I don't think anybody has not gotten paid on time the correct amount. So, like, I just feel like when dietitians jump into hiring and they have not created effective and efficient systems around billing, I feel like it is very irresponsible and it becomes a problem and it is not fair to our field, right? If we are going to do a service to anybody, it should be doing a solid to registered dietitians and CNSs who we hire and who trust us. Okay. That's why I get crazy on that topic. And you probably know if you were on a coaching call with me or like you were on an interview with me for the coaching program and you said that to me, you probably got like lunatic Amy coming out because I am so protective of our field. And I do not think that often dietitians are that protective. So, and then the last piece is reconciliation. Reconciliation is like understanding what claims are outstanding, knowing how to pull an aging report in your EMR so you know how much money is outstanding, having KPIs around outstanding money. What I mean by that is like in my practice, I have everybody do scorecards, like all the employees. And so the person that runs my office has a scorecard, and one of the things they have to put down every Friday is how much money is outstanding beyond 6 weeks. Okay, so like what insurance claims, are we owed that we have not collected because we have probably done something incorrectly on the front end, so those are just some of the metrics that we use, in terms of my practice. So reconciliation is an important piece. So once you guys have mastered kind of like the mental piece, right? Then the framework is optimizing your systems, right? Because we do not want to bring a dietitian into a shaky foundation, right? The S, everybody's least favorite part of the B.O.S. framework, the S, okay? Do you have consistent revenue in a referral pipeline, right? So, and for most of you guys, you may not even know your metrics, right? So you have to be able to consistently manage your own caseload and that of others, okay? The biggest mistake I see dietitians make in hiring is they decrease their own personal pay. And I get it, don't get me wrong. Like I wanted to like half my caseload like a normal human being. But as soon as if you decrease your caseload too quickly, right? Like you're going to be out major revenue. Like I see this probably like most times per week when I'm on coaching calls with dietitians. Like, it's like the fire's burning right now. You have somebody and you want to give them all your patients or you want to start taking less. The reality is like you probably have to just like put blinders on and just keep on going with your caseload until you have gotten like everybody on your team up to capacity. Most of you guys take your foot off the pedal way too quickly, and then your top line revenue suffers substantially. So you need to know your payer mix, right? You need to know your reimbursement rates, and most importantly, you guys need to know your profit margins. Um, Most of you guys don't know your metrics, right? And so like you do not know things like how many new appointments you have coming in each, like what types of appointments if you're a hybrid practice, right? So like I know like to a T what percentage of total patients served per month are telehealth and what are virtual, right? So that way I know when I need to add in new different types. Do you guys know your profit per patient? Do you know your operating expenses, both static and variable? Do you know what your expected retention rates are or should be within your practice, right? So those are all kind of different KPIs. Kind of a KPI is a key performance indicator, and something you guys should establish baselines in terms of that. But I can tell you for every single dietitian on my team, I can tell you how much each dietitian brings in, top line, we kind of call that top line revenue. And then I can tell you exactly how much money we make profit on each dietitian. Because that way I know how much I can pay them. And I'm going to show you guys like something. I'm going to show you like compensation so you can kind of get a sense of what it might look like. But if you don't know your profit margins and you don't know any of the numbers that I just mentioned, it's really hard to scale, and make money. So those are really, really important. So you have to be able to cover a new hire's pay without dipping into your savings. So that's why it's really important to know your overhead. So my overhead on every single dietitian, so I don't make money on each dietitian until we clear probably, it depends on like the dietitian, but it costs me about $360 per dietitian before we even hit like we see our first patient. It takes me about 17 to 21 hours to train and onboard a new dietitian. And remember, that's non-client facing time. So that is time that the practice, incurs, right? So, so we're in the red, right? When you guys are hiring because you need to train and you cannot bill, for that time. So you want to have at least 3 months of operating expenses in your business. If you're one of my coaching clients, I carry 6 months. Um, and I carry 6 months, and then my accounting team, like as long as we maintain that, like they will siphon off the rest of the money that's in the account. As long as there's always 6 months when I log into Bank of America for all of my brands, then the rest of the money we will siphon off as a distribution, so on and so forth. But we always 100% of the time have 6 months of operating expenses. Because if you're in an insurance-based practice, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, it probably was like 4 years ago, but it felt like last year, like Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield stopped covering for telehealth visits. It wasn't that they stopped doing it, it was a back end issue. And so, like, it took them like 4 or 5 months to correct it. And we see about 400 plus Blue Cross Blue Shield patients a month, right? And so like people still needed to get paid, and like we do both in person and telehealth, right? But like that was money that was not coming in. And yes, we got paid on every single patient. I'm not worried about that. But I needed to be responsible enough to know, you know what I mean, that everybody was fine. And for some of you guys on this call, you may have remembered I was saying to a lot of you guys, like, if you need a small business loan to cover this, I am happy to help. But you want to be responsible, and have those. And so if you're relying on bursts of referrals and random inquiries, right, that's when we might want to go more into marketing strategy, right? So it's like, that's why I think it's really important for you to know, if you guys know any metric, how many new patients are you getting per month, right? And then it's like the law of averages. I feel like for us, like the last couple of months have been super slow. And it's not a summer thing. I know a lot of people will say, because usually like summer is pretty busy because yeah, like everybody's home. It's like everybody wants to be seen. So for me, like there is a red flag, in terms of the numbers of patients we're getting. And so I have to go much harder and much deeper on marketing. right? So it's like it's not that, all the dietitians have the patients that they want to see, but what I see happen in many practices, and it just happened in mine, is we become complacent with marketing, right? We just have enough patients, everybody's happy. But when you start to look at numbers, like the numbers don't lie, right? And so it's really important for you guys before you hire that you guys have a consistent pipeline in terms of how your patients are coming through. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about marketing, but what I can tell you from my experience with working with hundreds of dietitians each year, people ask me what the best marketing strategy is. The best marketing strategy is usually the one that's most uncomfortable for you guys. And that's not sending doctors mailers. Like that's cold. That's like cold marketing, right? For a lot of it, it's like going into the offices, networking, like doing the shit you don't want to do, showing up on social media. So it's generally like if you're not at capacity and you need more patients, it's usually the thing that you are avoiding doing that you need to do, that's going to move your business forward, like clockwork. You know what I mean? So, like, you have to unfortunately get, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay. Like I said at the start of this talk, this was probably the space that I think I took the least for granted was the S, right? I was generally pretty good with finances. My systems were pretty solid because I didn't have a choice. But support and leadership side, I don't think I was necessarily like ready for. And what I mean by that is in the beginning of my practice, I got super lucky. I got really lucky. And so I had really good people that worked for me, or remotely good people that just kind of did their jobs. Um, and then as we scaled and we hired more people, it's like the people were like, I didn't have all A+ players, right? But I was used to having all A+ players. And I was used to not having to manage and be the fucking CEO of my business, right? And so people generally did what they were supposed to do, have nothing to do with me. But like the leadership piece and the mentoring piece, and having the hard conversations was single-handedly and still to this day remains one of the hardest areas of my business, one of the hardest areas of my life. So it's
Good, how are you?
everybody mute themselves. So
Yes.
is that Katie?
Yeah. Yeah, I just ran both software.
Hey, Katie, you want to mute yourself?
Okay.
Okay. Oh man, let me just go. Okay, guys, if
Okay,
you
great.
have
Thank
not
you.
muted yourself,
Bye.
okay. OMG. So I want to talk about something. It's totally like a side note, but I am in a coaching program with a very well-known coach, and if we unmute our phones by accident, we get thrown off the call, which is actually really interesting. And like we have to like do a whole thing in order to get invited back into the call. So I think for most like why I really love that is I think it elevates the game, and it like forces dietitians to be better, right? But anyway, that was a side note. So you will need to delegate and have hard conversations. And that is extremely challenging, right? So it's like you will have to manage human resources. And remember, I was saying at the top of the call, like I don't think I was prepared for this because I had really good people and they did most of what they were supposed to do. And when people didn't do what they were supposed to do, then it was my job to have the hard conversations. I don't think I've ever had a problem being like the example. But what I have found in the many years of hiring, more so with new dietitians coming into the space, is that it's just a different skill set that the new dietitians bring. And I'm not trying to be a martyr, but I feel like when I did my internship in 2006, 2007 at Yale, like it nearly killed me. Like, you know what I mean? It was probably one of the hardest things, one of my hardest years that I ever had. But I felt that I came out of my internship like ready to, like very well prepared. And I feel like as somebody who is hiring now, I feel like the 0 to 2 years of dietitians who have 0 to 2 years of experience, like their skill level is very different than what I saw in the past, right? And so I find I have many more hard conversations with those types of dietitians, which is expected, right? If you have a new hire who does not have a ton of experience, there is 100% chance that you will have to spend a lot of time, coaching and giving them feedback. Okay. So, but I think for me, I just was not ready for that piece. So the biggest shift for me was going from clinician to CEO, leader, and strategist. So, like I said, I think that most dietitians don't really, I think, and I know I get it. You're talking to somebody who loves to make a shit ton of money. You're talking to a dietitian that understands profit margins, but I think a lot of dietitians, they get into this to make money, but they do not realize that their number one responsibility is to the dietitians and to the dietitians on their team, because your ability to make money for you is going to be their livelihood. Okay. People always say to me, like, gosh, there's no words. There's no words for what my email box looks like on a on a day-to-day. But a lot of people will email me and say, why don't you rally against Faye? Why don't you rally against Berry Street? Because the reality is, for some of you guys on this call, they put food on your table. Like, they put clothes on your kids. And like, who am I to judge somebody else's business? Right? Just because I don't approve it and I wouldn't do it in my own practice, for many of you guys, that is your livelihood. So like, and that is what you have chosen to do. So like when you are an owner or an operator, it is your job to make sure that your RD's livelihood is being met, right? You also need to lead and delegate even when it's messy as fuck. I say this as somebody who has been in the trenches. And generally speaking, I can say historically speaking, every single time I have had a human resources issue, it has never been a good time. Okay. I had a dietitian who was basically stealing from me. And she was claiming certain things were personal referrals. We give them a shit ton more money for them. Long story short, she basically stole $6,400 from us. And we realized that on a Friday night. And it was, just to be very clear, it was also our fault that we hadn't noticed that some of the referrals that she was taking as personal referrals were patients that we literally handed her a fax on. But just like clockwork, right? That we realized that on a Friday night around 7 p.m. I was leaving for Paris the next morning. The last thing that was messy as fuck, I had somebody working for me. And I realized they were printing off patients' charts to take them with another dietitian to another practice, right? Guess what was happening? The next day I was leaving for Fancy. So I had to fire my whole administrative team 12 hours before I left on a plane for Fancy. And if you guys usually know my October, I'm at Fancy and then I come back and I usually do an international trip. And so I think I was in Italy that year. Anyway, like, it never happens at a good time. Meanwhile, at Fancy, I have 32 portals that I have no access to. I have a team I need to bill for. I now need to be the biller because my biller is no Moss. So in those situations, even when they're messy, like, you have to navigate. So group practice is about really having systems, because when you're a solopreneur, it's really about your time, right? And being a CEO means knowing why your practice exists. So when you're in shitty times like that, right? When you're in really shitty times like that, you can keep going. So your team doesn't just want a paycheck. They want to follow a leader with a purpose, right? And so we were fine. And to be honest with you, often when things are the messiest and you have to go all in and work your hardest, it usually turns out much better than you could have ever imagined. And I know that it's hard to feel that in the lesson, right? But you guys get to define kind of what success looks like, in this pathway. the last one, and then I will just speed it up because I know you guys probably have places to go on this Saturday and we'll get into your questions, is the gut check. I know we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, but I really want to come back to this, is that, are you thinking about hiring because you feel like you should? A lot of times in our lives, there are people that, we feel like we need to please, and we feel like we have to do things that maybe we don't want to do. And the need to, or the feel that you should go into a group practice should never be the reason why you do it, right? Because it does not have to be the only way that you scale, right? You can optimize your practice. You can add in group programs. You can add in programs and services. Or, like, my favorite one for a lot of you guys is, if you're really good at your private practice, you go business to business like I do, right? You teach other dietitians how you do the thing, right? That's why I'm a huge fan of dietitians supporting other dietitians, CNSs supporting other dietitians. And, because I feel like for many, that's a better calling for you than actually hiring, right? And so I say with hiring, it's either like a hell yeah, and you're excited, or if you feel like you're comparing yourself to everybody else, just, there's no need. Because having a group practice is a massive responsibility, and one that I love having. But like I said, had I gone back and slowed down to speed up, maybe in 2009, it may be a different story. So please do not feel you need to be a group practice owner, even if you are at capacity, 1,000,000%. Okay. Like, that may not be, like, you just may not be that type of person. And I love that not for you. You know what I mean? So you have to know who you are. And with that being said, you have to know your core values, right? That's the most important. You have to bulletproof the shit out of your systems. If you are not there yet, that is okay, but we need to optimize those first. If you are hiring somebody, you need crystal clear expectations in terms of roles and responsibilities. You need those 3 months, right? 6 months, preferably, of your finances. You need to be a ninja, a stealthy ninja at billing. And you need to be really good at marketing, because the livelihood of your dietitians are going to depend on it. So, like, the B.O.S.S method, basically what I want you guys to be able to do after this presentation is to go back and see, where do you fall in terms of this? And then, based on where you fall, right, that's probably going to be the area where you optimize. But you can't do anything, but doing everything is going to be challenging as well. So I want to just skip this part because I feel like, but the part that I want to drive home is this piece. A lot of you guys want to develop products and services, and I get that. And that can be lucrative. But what I would strongly caution is, you need to have active income before you do these things, right? And so I would say you need 6 months of operating expenses. You need to be hitting your retirement goals before you start to do these things. Because I see a lot of you guys put the cart before the horse with this. And just because you want to create it does not mean the people you want to sell the shit to, right? If I see one more business coach, like, showing an image of how she created a meal plan software, like, most of your fucking patients don't want meal plan software, right? They do not want to learn how to meal prep. I know that's what they should, don't get me wrong. Like, I understand that, but I'm not going to pay money for a meal prep course when I can just go online and probably for the same amount buy like a meal delivery service. I understand. Yes, we want to teach them how to fish, but like, that's not what they want, right? And so passive income is never, I put rarely, it's never, right? If you guys know, like, I work my ass off, you know what I mean, for, the things that I produce and sell. So what I would say, if you guys are here, and I'm not adverse to you being here, meaning like, okay, cool. You're like, yeah, Aim, I don't want to hire. I do think I want to build in, but you have to build a minimum viable offer. So, like, a lot of times you have to do shit for free and see if people are willing to do the free shit. if you have a product, a service, let's just say it's like a membership. I don't even want to use membership because that's such a shiny object that everybody and their mother wants to have, and like none of your patients may want it. But whatever you do, you have to test. And the best way to test is, are people willing to do the thing for free? Right? And if they're not willing to do the thing for free, then they're probably not going to pay you for it. Right? And so that's why asking your patients what they want, looking to the market and seeing where the need is not being met, and then testing again, and then you scale it. Because if you cannot clearly communicate the value of the thing you want to sell, whether it be time saved, the results you get, the access to something unique that nobody else is doing, you essentially become a commodity, and then people shop the commodity, right? So that's why like tiered pricing, like those are things that I offer. You offer a really good freebie, a mini course, a flag, all of these things. But a lot of you guys want to jump into a membership when you don't even have like an active audience of people that want to do the thing. I mean, this is a whole other, I'm doing a whole, for my coaching clients, I'm doing a whole marketing course, and we're going to go deep on all of these things on this screen right now. But I think like people are really tempted by shiny objects, and most dietitians have not built active income first, right? And so passive income or additional income, yes, it's amazing, we stack this on top of our real income, right? But I wasn't even building out reimbursement dietitian until I was still seeing 45 patients a week when I was building out reimbursement dietitian, right? Because it's like I needed to make money, and I needed to make money now. And so I see this in our space, and I see, as somebody who runs and sells products and services to both patients and to dietitians, I can tell you that a lot of the information out there is just incorrect. And a lot of you guys want to sell shit that nobody wants, right? Nobody wants like 10 heart healthy breakfasts. Like ChatGPT can tell them that, right? And don't get me wrong, I do not think our jobs are replaced by ChatGPT. I think actually quite the opposite. But I think a lot of you guys want to sell shit that people don't want. And then you get frustrated when nobody buys your shit. So like I said, I think there is a very big market for this stuff. But I think your product needs to be positioned correctly. Okay. So I want to show you a couple of things behind the scenes. I'm going to dive deep into all your questions. We'll get to them all, but I want to show you just some of the things that you may not know that I offer for helping you with the process. And then we will jump right back into questions. So I offer a whole hiring course that covers all of this. I hired an attorney. I hired a human resources team. This is one of the best things I have ever created. I do not really spend a ton of time promoting this, because most of you guys, I do not want to show you a shiny object when you have not, crushed it in your private practice. But I want to just show you guys some of the things, so it's like I take you through every single step of the process. It's like, obviously, yes, are you ready? Yes, we go through all of those things. But I want to just show you an example. I take you through taxes. I'll show you an example of something that, like, you guys get access to my policies and procedures. And so like this thing is a 40-page document that I have for my practice that you can just bootleg and copy. You do not need to write the whole thing. I am a ninja at employee compensation. I can help you work through what your compensation package should look like, from benefits to PTOs. How do you bonus people, right? So this course is one of the best things I think I've ever created. My reimbursement coaching program is the best thing I've ever created. But like I said, I do not promote this publicly like a lot, because I do not want people to jump into this. But if you're somebody who kind of you're ready to hire and you just need a lot of hand holding, like this course will give you everything you need and more. Okay. And then, and I'll show you like the pricing, which is important. Then we'll go into your questions. So I can help that way. The hiring course is $19.97 or 6 payments of $350. And what I'm going to do until Monday, and I'll send you guys out an email. If you purchase that, I'm going to give you 2 things that are not publicly available. Right now, how to hire assistants is not publicly available. It's something I did for my coaching clients. And the second one is like probably worth it's the second bonus is like worth the program course is um one of the dietitians on in my membership who's been one of my clients since 2020 as well. A couple of weeks ago, she did a fucking epic masterclass on metrics, and it walks you through every single metric you need to know as a practice owner with real examples. She's a practice owner in where is she? She's in Arizona, and she has actually a physician that works on her team. So anyway, so I'm willing to, those are not, those are just those two bonuses right now, are only available to my clients, and they will tell you like those are really good ones. So anyway, that's just one I wanted to show you guys. I'll send out an email with links to all of this. But I don't promote this a lot because I want you guys to focus on building your insurance-based practice. So let's get to, I don't even have any. I think I talked enough. I want to see what your questions are. So let me stop share and then we'll rock and roll. Yeah. Thanks everyone for hanging around. Let's go. Okay. Let's go up. Okay. Okay. What about a virtual assistant for 1099? Love me a virtual assistant for 1099. Like the guy that runs my practice, and I go over it, like I show you guys how I source them. Yeah, virtual assistants are the best. They do not need to be in person. Until 2024, I had like local people, like real live human beings that were my assistants. But I love virtual assistants can be a 1099 role. It's going to depend also on the country. If you 1099 a virtual assistant in the United States, generally that violates scope. If you hire somebody virtually in the Philippines, you would pay them in their home currency through like a program like Gusto or ADP, but the rules are much different. But for most people hiring virtual assistants in the United States, that is more of an employee role because you are telling them what to do, right? Remember, anytime you tell anybody what to do, unfortunately, like that violates the independent contractor relationship. So 1099s in other countries, 20 out of 10, I recommend. And that's what the whole hiring assistance goes over. But hiring in the United States, there are a lot more loopholes. And in terms of 1099s, also another thing, at least in my experience from being audited by the IRS, is like that wasn't the reason why we got audited by any means. Like we were part of like a random like subs whatever. But anyway, like they will always go first and foremost after any independent contractors you have on your team. And if it's a real audit, they will interview them. At least they did on my team. And it was totally fine. But like they don't fuck around with independent contractors. So just be really careful with that. Do you have any resources on scaling without hiring? Yeah, absolutely. So one of my most like sold course like is if you go to reimbursementdietitian.com, go to the store. We recently did a really good one on how to integrate programs and packages and a la carte services. So I talk about my experience with things like the body gem, right, which is like metabolism. I talk about incorporating meal plans, memberships. We kind of talk about it all. So it's in Reimbursement Dietitian in the store, and you can just buy it as a standalone. And it goes like in super detail about real live experience. Because I think what we see a lot in the Instagram space is we see a lot of coaches talking about passive products, talking about things to sell, but those particular coaches have never sold shit. Right. And I'm not like, I don't mean to cast shade, but you always want to kind of understand like where we learn the most is like when we were practitioners of the craft, right? And so I will only ever really speak to things that I know can make money and that people want, right? In my practice, everybody wants their metabolism tested. It's like $150. It costs us $17 for the mouthpiece. It's like a win-win, right? And so it's like, it's a service that people want, and they're willing to pay money for. But like I said, as a whole, most people are not willing to pay money for a meal plan, whether or not we want to create it or not. So, would a VA be an employee versus an individual contractor? Great question. I would say, like I said, in the United States, if they are United States based, I do think because you're going to be telling them what to do, right? You're going to be giving them your playbook, and you're going to say, let me see if I can find an example. I can just show you like playbooks that I have for my employees. Like it's like this is what you do every single day. This is what you do once a week. This is what you do every Friday. So it is if you are telling somebody the sequence, at least this is what the IRS told me. Like anytime you're giving like a person on your team a sequence or a specific way to do things, then that falls under the IRS's level of like behavioral control. What range of profit margins do you think is most ideal? So it's really going to depend. And so in my practice, remember, we're an established practice and we've been going since 2009. And so my profit margins are probably closer to now that we have W-2s, we're probably 50% profit. That is kind of unheard of. But it's like we also have really efficient systems and like, so it's going to be different, right? Where my best friend is a foot and ankle reconstructive surgeon and like his profit margins, he has a private practice because he does like reconstruction, he does like diabetes, like amputations, like if your foot's like chopped off and it's on the other side of the road, he puts it back on. He says his profit margins for his practice are like 11%, right? But their top line of what they're bringing in is much higher. So I think like it's not a matter of like what the profit margin should be. It should be really like are you, it's like, are you operationally as efficient as you can? But we're like 50-50. And I think over the years, I think in the beginning, like the smaller we were, the higher the margin. So like before I had a team, I think we were like even higher. I think we were 70% profit with like 30% expenses. But every time you hire, you generally will incur extra costs. And so that's why it's hard to give somebody like profit margin like goals because you're going to be at a different place when you are hiring. Usually when you're hiring, right? Like you have, like I said, I think I have about 17 to 21 hours of like of unbillable time for the dietitian before we start seeing patients. So it just tends to be like somewhat different. But right now, I think I just did the numbers for our practice last month, and I think it's like 50-50. And so even on top line, if we have a dietitian that's bringing in, say the dietitian's bringing in like $120,000 to $150,000 on the front line for the profit, like we can still afford them to pay them extremely well and still maintain profit margins, right? So if we are operationally efficient and we fill those dietitian schedules, right? They can make a lot of money for the practice, but then as you guys saw with my compensation, like some of these dietitians are making $90,000 to $100,000 and they're still pretty substantial profit margin. So I think a lot of times it's going to demand, I would say I'm a much bigger fan of hiring full-time dietitians than hiring part-time because part-time dietitians, even though that's what you do in the business and in the very beginning of your business, totally fine. It's like there's going to be like a window in terms of, but yeah, so that's kind of where we operate. Where do you keep track of this? I'm using Excel sheets, which can be a little tedious. So a couple tools that we use in my practice, so we use Asana. We use Calyx, which kind of sucks for capability, but I still use like a ton of spreadsheets. I don't know. Like, I think that that's why I don't think that AI is ever going to replace us. Like, because we use spreadsheets, Google Sheets. There's no reason why you wouldn't, you know what I mean? It's like I can go in on any given day and like basically see a dashboard of where we're at. And then one of the things I would also recommend, and I didn't do this at the beginning of my practice, was I manage the practice week to week and I look at numbers week to week. So let me just show you an example. So like every Friday, I have a sticky where the practice is. Like, I know how much money I made in my coaching, private practice across all the brands. I know things I've sold, right down to applications, right down to number of patients. So that way I'm not working. I think what most dietitians do is, right, like you guys look at your numbers at the end of the quarter and then you make assessments and changes based on that. But like at that point, you're too late, right? So that's why one of the things that, what you guys put your attention on will grow, right? And so if you want more revenue, you want more patients, you need to be in the know of what those numbers look like. But yeah, I think like I'm like all for Excel spreadsheets because my spreadsheets, like on my spreadsheets in the hiring program, I think I give you access to them. Like it shows you, like you input this number. Like I'm not amazing at Excel, but I can put together formulas. So it's like the dietitian brings in this amount. This is what her static expenses are. This is what we pay them. And then I have it that it will calculate. We know how many patients he or she saw. We know how much they brought in. So then we're able to see revenue, not only revenue per patient, but also, I'm sorry, profit per patient. We're also able to see how much it costs us on some level. So yeah, we pay so in terms of like, yeah, we totally pay our dietitians more money in terms of compensation at different rates. And so we create their incentives, all like some of the incentives that we have. Let me just see because I have them up. I really believe with high performing dietitians, if you give them incentives and bonuses, they will work towards exceeding that. So we have like a productivity bonus, where if they hit a certain amount of hours of client facing, we give them like a $300 bonus. We give them a client retention. If they hit 90%, we give them a couple $100, testimonials. If they bring in 3 people from their own channel, we give them a monthly bonus. If that person stays on for more than 3 visits, we give them another bonus. You know what I mean? And then as the dietitians get more experience, we will put in like leadership roles. So like in my practice, we have level 1, like tier 1, 2, and 3 based on experience. And then we have a very clear track of like, if you come in as a new dietitian, like how do we take you, it's like I hate ambiguous shit, like, you know what I mean? And so I have very specifically, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you advance to level 2 where the pay is much higher. You get more PTO, and then as we get to tier 3, we are incentivizing based on like, are they mentoring other dietitians in our practice? So on and so forth. So, yeah, so we just kind of manage it like that. And then rather than give them a per patient but yeah, we give them a bonus based on their own personal referrals. The same way we would bonus them on like a Google review if they like gave a ton of you know what I mean? So retention. But what I want to encourage you guys to, I spent probably the last 3 to 4 weeks, it's like my desk is full, working on the compensation structures. And what I was spending a lot of time on, and because I think it's really important, was like the incentives and the bonuses. Because I do not think like a lot of practices, I think a lot of dietitians spend time on the base salary, but they don't. So it's like, I think that there's a lot of overachieving dietitians that if you incentivize them correctly, it will be a win-win for your practice, right? So it's like, if I have a baseline level so my full-time dietitians do 25 patient-facing hours a week, and then they get paid for 10 hours of administrative time. And then if they exceed that consistently, and they're bringing in more money for the practice, we're paying them a lot more. So it's like there's this win, for me, it's a win-win, right? They make more money for the practice. I want to give them more money. And so I think it's really important to have incentives in place and like a bonus structure so they understand. Like, I think most dietitians want to win, meaning like your employees want to win. You just need to show them and teach them what winning looks like, right? Because I think a lot of times what I can tell you from my experience is like, I'd be like, you know, mad at my, like I would be very frustrated with my employees, and my husband would say to me like, "Well, did you clearly communicate what the expectation was?" And I was like, "No, I just thought they would know that you don't wear a crop top and Jinko jeans to an appointment." So anytime you make assumptions, right, and the expectations aren't clear, they will do what they want and make up their own rules. So anything that you guys make as assumptions, so that's why when then you flip that and you say, okay, if I get crystal clear with my expectations and I show them exactly what needs to get done, then they have no other choice to either meet those or exceed those, right? But I do not think it's good for you guys to bonus and incentivize people unless they are exceeding baseline or benchmarks. So that's why I'm not a super fan of like annual raises, because like you're just arbitrarily giving dietitians more money, not all of which they've demonstrated added value. And so that's why we've gotten really crystal clear with the compensation in terms of like, how do you move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, and then what changes. So it's like, I think that's really important to kind of get clear with that. How do you manage expenses and afford an assistant? Great question. So I always say, and I know nobody wants to hear this, if you cannot, if like, generally speaking, like you need to be able, you cannot hire an assistant until you are bringing in enough money realistically on the front end. And so for some people, that means that like they need to have a number that makes them feel like safe. But for many virtual assistants, like in the Philippines, for example, which is where we source most of ours from, it's like they're like $5 to $8 an hour. And so in the course on hiring, I show you how you calculate your buyback time, but there's a very specific formula. If you have the book, it's by Dan Martell. It's called Buy Back Your Time. You take like your top line revenue and you divide it by a certain amount of hours, and then you can see exactly how much you can pay somebody. So even if you're deep within your expenses, most people can still afford a certain amount. And so it's called like your buy back your time rate. And so for many dietitians, it's like nominal, but you can still afford to hire. With that being said, hiring anybody, like for like every person, like for every assistant that I've hired to my team, I've probably interviewed like 40 or had 40 like interviews scheduled because a lot of times they won't show up. But like once you find a good assistant, usually like in the Philippines, they're 12 hours ahead. So it works really good in terms of how they work. But first make sure you have your expenses like locked and loaded. And then you would do like use like the buy back your time principle, where I think like you take your total income and you divide it by the amount of hours you work, and you're able to see in some extent like what you're able to offer them. So, super good. What happened? I can't put my glasses on. What happens if your dietitian sees fewer than what you're expecting, then a lot of times that becomes your issue, right? So it's like, it's the scenario of like, it's not my fault, but it's my problem, right? And so then you either have to it's either your fault for not front loading them enough patients. It may be a retention issue. It may be an education issue. So, you have to make sure that, you have to make sure that you have to kind of get to the root of why the 25 isn't there. So I'll just give you an example of like, we're switching everybody to that structure September, like more or less. Most people are on that structure now, but like we have a dietitian on my team and I allow them to some extent to have availability open. She has 6.5 hours of availability open in her schedule. And for part-time people, I make them have to do 12 patient facing hours per da 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 da. But anyway, long story short, she was like, "Well, are you going to give me more patients?" I was like, "I can't give you more patients because your availability sucks." So it's like some of those people will self-destruct because they're not offering enough. You know what I mean? No, I can't give you 12 patients because you have your schedule open from, like 8:30 to 9. You close it from 9 to 12, and then you open it from 12 to 1:30. Like nobody wants to come in at those times. So yeah, so making sure that, and so that's why a lot of times you overschedule, right? Like they probably have to have 28, they have to have more hours scheduled because we have to compensate that people will actually not show up. And when they see more, how does the payroll billing look different? They get more based on, so I have very specific KPIs for each level. And so we record all of that information and we can pull that from the EMR. So right now I could go into Calyx and I can tell you how many patient-facing hours every single dietitian on my team had. So I can average that over the month and see, are they exceeding where they should be, right? And so once again, not are they meeting the 25 patient hours per week, are they exceeding at the benchmark that I have established? Because if they have, then we give them a shit ton more money. So so that's kind of how we do it there. Make sure I answered that. Payroll. So Nourish is W-2. Yeah, Nourish is W-2, and everybody structures their business. So Nourish is W-2. People seem to have a good experience. I can't comment on their payment structure because I spend very little time looking at these companies. Yeah, you can pay hourly. I mean, I don't have any thoughts on anybody else's business, because it's not my business. You know what I mean? I believe that dietitians need stability. I believe that dietitians, should have normal compensation that everybody else has. So I do not necessarily believe that if you pay them per hour, you certainly can, but you know what I mean? Then it becomes your responsibility to fill those. So yeah, I spend very little time looking at other people's businesses because I know my business model best. And what I can tell you is that if my practice is not profitable, it's because I have not done the work it needs to do and know my numbers. So like I've spent months working out compensation, and so I know my numbers in and out. But yeah, I think they get paid, but I'm not adverse to, like, if that works for somebody's practice, it just doesn't, it defies one of my core values. It's like I don't feel necessarily that, you know what I mean? Because some dietitians may be like, they may see a shit ton of patients. Some dietitians may underperform, and that's a problem. But I think in most scenarios, you have to get to the root why people aren't meeting the benchmark. And I don't think it's always like self-evident. So yeah, I don't really look at other people's business. But yeah, so that's why, like, that's how I run my business. Like, we have salaried positions and there's a really clear progression on people, on where people move through, but that's also because like I've fucked it up like 100 times. You know what I mean? Like it's only as good as it sounds like really good now. And people are like, oh my God, that's amazing. But that's only because it wasn't that way, the whole time. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Anything I can help with? Okay. Awesome. Of course. Always happy to listen. This is a topic obviously I'm just super passionate about. And I just feel like if done right, I think like we could really elevate our field, right? And I think that like it will decrease some of the noise, right? Like surrounding the phase and the Berry Streets. But I think the only way to like break that is just to be better, right? And so my goal as a practice owner, is to be better. And hopefully establish a standard that that it elevates our field versus take it down. So cool. So I'll send out an email. So if you guys are interested in the hiring course, like I said, the bonuses are not publicly available. We have a lot of my coaching clients on now, so they could tell you those 2 classes are really good. And then I will see you guys soon. Bye guys.